Shana Tova. Let's try that again. Shana Tova. It's so good to hear your voices. And it's so good to hear cantor and choir. Paul Staley, thank you for helping us musically to enter into the holiday spirit. There's something about the melodies of High Holy Days that go right deep into our souls and really help us arrive in that space. This time of year we wear different clothing. A lot of you have white kippot on, or maybe you have new socks like I have. But we have a way of kind of entering into this time because it's hard to believe it's here. I look around, and this is our 7th year as a community, as Shir Shalom. 7th High Holy Days together. It feels amazing. For some of you, you've been there for the entire time, and some of you are newcomers, and it's just great. It's great for me to feel so connected to all of you, and it's great for all of you as well. I hope that you feel connected to one another. I know Cantor and I and Bruce and the choir and Paul, we're really, really happy and joyful that you're here. I want to try to put into words tonight something I've been feeling for a little while here in our community, something that's been different over the course of the year that I think it's important to name. 11 months ago this week, the worst single attack on a Jewish institution in America occurred less than 4 hours down the road in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. In the space of a few minutes' time, 11 good people were taken from us. 6 were injured just for attending that morning Shabbat services. In the space of a few minutes, our world had changed. I don't know if you felt that. I did. I felt it from the moment that I started getting text messages during our Shabbat morning service, and I stepped out of the Ganenu room where we meet, and I saw that something terrible had happened. I felt it from the time that I shared the news with that group gathered there that day, and we realized that things were different. I felt it as a stream of calls and texts came to me, to my phone, and social media messages over the course of that day. I felt it when we gathered at the home of Nina Lukin to try to figure out what to do, how to respond. And I felt it the next night at Temple Beth Tzedek, the former building, and the faces of the community members that had gathered at the vigil that night. Something in the community had changed that we couldn't get back. Shalom, peace, had been taken from us that day, and somehow we have been searching for it ever since. I can feel it here in this sanctuary right now, that absence. And I know that feeling, as many of us do, people that have traveled. How many of you have traveled abroad to different synagogue communities? When you go abroad, you can feel it because it's a normal occurrence to have guards at every service. It's not so much for us. I remember going to Paris and being told to put my kippah in my pocket. I don't know if people have had that experience. I felt it in Berlin when the synagogue, a nondescript building, I had to walk in, there was a guard in front. I felt it in Istanbul when I visited there years ago, and you had to register and go through more security than El Al to be able to get into that space. I certainly felt it at times in Jerusalem particularly after seeing the flowers left behind after the Sparrow bombing many years ago. I felt it on 9/11. And I have felt it at times in my life. It's just I never felt it here. I never had to worry about it here in this space. And that feels different. It feels wrong that we have to be so vigilant that our world so quickly has taken a turn. The Torah teaches of a time when the people of Israel were at odds with one another. Many had turned to idolatry, and God's wrath had sprang forth against them, causing a great plague to afflict those who sinned. The entire community seemed in danger of collapse. Out of this emerged the grandson of Aaron, the high priest, Pinchas ben Eleazar, who took it upon himself to restore order, impaling an Israelite man and a Moabite woman right inside of their very tent, one of the more horrific scenes in all of Torah. Pinchas's actions stopped the plagues in its tracks. The next day, he is called before the elders of Israel and presented with a very strange thing, God's Brit Shalom, Briti Shalom, a covenant of peace. It's a very strange gift for such a horrific act. But in the Torah, we can see how whoever was writing it down long before the rabbis, that there was a sense of confusion about the shalom, because the shalom is written a little differently. And I wrote it out. I don't know if you could see. I couldn't find black ink. So you can see the shin and the lamed and the mem, the final mem. But what you notice is that the vav is cut in half. This is not something we can go back and find out why the vav is cut in half. But what happens is if it's just shin lamed mem, it's the Hebrew word shalem, to pay. When peace is taken from our society, we all pay. We enter 5780. It's hard to even get our mouth around it. With a broken shalom. How can we restore it? How can we go back to 5779? How do we find our way after what happened? There are many things that give me hope, tikva, this year. I feel hope in the sanctuary of Temple Besedek when it was filled to capacity the Sunday after the Tree of Life attacked, with people throughout Western New York, Jews and Christians and Sikhs and Muslims of every stripe and denomination, over 500 strong. The night before, I had an estimate. I thought maybe we'd get 80, but we got 500 there that night. I felt hope in the work of our own member, Jay Mesnikoff, who traveled to Pittsburgh that week to help with the burial arrangements for the victims. What an honor it is that he took us with him to help that community. I felt hope in the countless phone calls, emails, letters, flowers, and even dove feathers. Yes, I got an envelope of dove feathers that came in from all over Western New York to support our community. I felt hope in the hard work of our board of directors, and Bruce, to fill our security holes and ensure that our community was better protected in the event of a future attack. We owe them a great deal, a debt of gratitude for the speed at which they've worked to be able to address some of our central needs. I felt hope in you, in your hard work, in adapting to the changes, in helping to fund them. When we asked for help with it, you didn't blink, you did help. You made sure that we could make the changes that we needed. Felt hope in the broader Jewish community, upgrading our security infrastructure, including our new community safety czar, Susan Damari, and the work that she has done to create relationships with local law enforcement. I felt hope in our recently restarted Jewish Community Relations Council. JCRCs were staples of the Jewish community, but over decades they started disappearing. But we realized we actually needed them again, so we restarted them. I felt hope in the dozens of members of the Jewish community who showed up at the Haim Road Mosque after the shootings in New Zealand. A recognition that what we are doing is so much more than just a Jewish problem. And for me, most importantly of all, is the hope that I felt in the reaction of our young people, gathering in large groups to combat gun violence, address climate change, and generally strive to make this world better. 6 months before the Tree of Life, I stood at a podium in front of City Hall, watching high school student after high school student proclaim their commitment to changing the status quo when it comes to gun violence. The Parkland shooting had occurred the week before, and everyone was outraged that 19 years after Columbine, we're now 20 years after Columbine, the attacks had continued. Each student spoke about how each new incident was re-traumatizing. Their entire childhoods, I learned that day, their entire childhoods had been shaped by these attacks. Parkland, a largely Jewish enclave of southern Florida, felt personal as well. Several of the students from the school had traveled up to be present with us that day, and my heart broke with the pain and heartache these young women and men had experienced. But my heart swelled with pride knowing they would be the ones to help ensure a solution. We cannot remove brokenness from this world. From the moment we were banished from the Garden of Eden, we have been marked by the curse of Cain. Human beings are imperfect creatures, and peace is no simple matter. I think often of the words of Yehuda Amichai, the poet of Israel and my favorite poet, who sought not just an ordinary peace, but a wild one, that he wrote, comes without the big noise of beating swords into plowshares, without words, without the thud of the heavy rubber stamp. Let it be light, floating, and lazy like white foam, a little rest for the wombs. And I think of the words of my teacher, Dr. Neil Gilman from the Jewish Theological Seminary, who spoke about the Midrash connected to a verse from Deuteronomy that calls for Moses to make an ark of wood and place within it the 10 Commandments. Not just, the rabbis suggest, the ones that were whole, but the ones that were broken as well. Brokenness, he told our class, is not a bad thing. If we can incorporate the two sets of commandments into our lives, both the broken and the whole, we will be stronger for it. One of the most popular traditions at a Jewish wedding is the breaking of the glass. We do this for many reasons, most famously to remind ourselves about the destruction of the temple in Jerusalem. But there's another Kabbalistic understanding that tells us the broken glass is a reminder of the brokenness in the world and how it is the job of all of us to perform acts of tikkun olam, of repairing the world. In Japanese culture, there is the concept of kintsugi, a golden joinery, where the cracks in a vessel are resealed with golden paint. Why? So that brokenness is visible, part of the history of the object, not something we disguise. We begin this year knowing the world cannot be the same. The feelings we have after Pittsburgh will stay with us for a long time. Tonight we perform an act of kintsugi on our hearts with stripes of bright gold paint. There is beauty in our brokenness. 11 months ago, I said, was when the attack happened. And 11 months is traditionally the end of the first year of mourning. We don't actually mourn for a full 12 months. It says only the complete sinners, that's what you mourn for. So we mourn for 11 months. That's good enough. And so we have done So I would like to close this talk with the names of the 11. I invite you to rise, and in our community, remember them. Joyce Feinberg, 75. Richard Gottfried, 65. Rose Mallinger, 97. Jerry Rabinowitz, 66. Cecil Rosenthal, 59. David Rosenthal, 54. Bernice Simon, 84. Sylvan Simon, 86. Daniel Stein, 71. Melvin Wax, 88. Irving Younger, 69. For those 11 souls, I ask you to commit yourself to 11 acts of loving kindness. In this way, we will ensure that their memories are always for a blessing. Kein Yiratzon, may it always be so. You may be seated. A good and sweet year to us all.